Hi, my name is Kai1. Today we're going to compare two budget-friendly macro lens. Both of them are under $500 super affordable, so which one is better? Let's start the image quality test. Aperture wide open. Astrhori is totally washed out with low contrast. Irix at wide open looks pretty good already. Stop down the aperture will help the low contrast problem on the Astrhori. The best aperture range is around f5.6 to f8 on Astrhori. Above f8, the image starts to fall apart. On the Irix, it's around f7.1 to f14. Above f14, the image starts to fall apart. Astrhori at the smallest aperture f22 also have the same low contrast problem. The Astrhori aperture control is not that precise throughout the range. Exposure change is kind of noticeable. On the Irix side, we have electronic aperture control, so we have fine control aperture if your camera support it, and the aperture exposure consistency is pretty good throughout the range on the Irix. Astrhori have some color shift at wide open aperture. At Irix side, we have consistent color throughout the range. Both of the lenses have minimal chromatic aberration. On the Astrhori, stop down the aperture doesn't help the chromatic aberration, but on the Irix, we stop down the aperture, the chromatic aberration will slightly improve. The spherical aberration on the Astrhori is a little bit crazy. Stop down the aperture to f8 to fix the spherical aberration problem. Above f11, the spherical aberration will start to fall apart. On the Irix, f6.3 to f16 will have really good spherical aberration control. Above f16, the spherical aberration will start to fall apart. So these are the star flare characteristics. Both of them looks pretty good. Next, lens flare test. On the Astrhori, the details and contrast are totally gone if you have strong light source shooting into the lens directly. On the Irix side, at least we can still see some contrast and details in the shot. On the Astrhori, it's totally washed out with zero details. This is the focus breathing and bokeh test. I spent my own time and money to make this review and comparison video, so if you like this video, just press the subscribe button to send your love and support. First one is from Astrhori. This is a 120mm f2.8 2x macro lens. Although the Irix 150mm is a 1x macro lens, I really like it. I already used this lens for several years. No any big problem. Really enjoy using this lens. The closest focusing distance is 34.5 centimeters from the focal plane of your sensor. So 150mm, you still can get really close to your subject to get those macro shots. So if you use those maybe like 90, 60, or 45, those wider angle macro lens, because those lenses are so close to your subject, you will block the light and you will scare the subject if you are shooting some kind of insect. But with this 150mm, you can have longer 34 centimeters working distance. So slightly further away, but you still can get those beautiful macro shots. The Irix macro lens, we have weather resistance. The Astrhori doesn't. The Irix lens looks gigantic, but it's actually lighter than the Astrhori. This Astrhori is like a brick. It's so heavy and it's super dense. And Astrhori, because of the weight, it's really front heavy. So if you mount it on the camera, you will feel like it's like tilting forward. So you gotta be careful. If you use it on a tripod, you will still get some micro vibration. On the Irix side, we can mount the lens directly onto the tripod to prevent front heavy problem and those unwanted micro vibration. The front diameter is slightly bigger on the Irix. So if you are going to use some UV glass, the Irix UV glass will be slightly more expensive. On Astrhori, we have some mounting holes on front of the lens, but it's actually kind of useless because it's not 1/4-inch screw. So it's not a standard. You gotta buy some special tools or arms to mount it on here. On the Irix lens, we have a lock ring. This is a special design. We can lock the focus adjustment. After several years of use, this lock ring is kind of useless already because it's super loose and we cannot even lock the lens anymore. And sometimes the lock ring will just turn together with the focusing ring and lock itself by itself. Astrhori is totally silent. It's super smooth, but the drag is a little bit too strong. You gotta spend so much force to turn the focusing ring. Look at this, I can't even adjust the focusing ring with one finger. This is just the drag is too strong. I hope they can loosen it a little bit to make it smoother, like easier to turn focusing ring. The Irix focusing ring are so smooth and you can turn it so effortlessly. But listen to this. So after several years of use, it's still so smooth, but we have some like grinding sound inside. I don't know what is causing this sound. But the best part of the Irix lens, we have a very long focusing throw. The focus ring, we can just keep turning to get those fine control in macro distance. But on the Astrhori side, the focusing ring are so short. We only have like 100 degrees of focusing ring turning distance. So it's really hard to get perfect focus at macro distance with the Astrhori lens. You will always overshoot a little bit and you gotta like correct it back a little bit and you just overshoot again. So it's like back and forth adjustment. On the Irix, it's just like smooth and you can just fine tune your focus control. This is way better design. The biggest difference between these two lenses will be the aperture control. So the Astrhori, we have manual control ring over here. And in the Irix, we only have electronic control. If you want manual control like Astrhori, you need to buy the cinema version. So this one in my hand is the photography version. It only have electronic control. It depends on which camera and what you want to achieve. Maybe the manual control will be better, or maybe the electronic control will be better. I personally like the electronic aperture for photography because it's just easier to control with the dials on the camera. But when I'm shooting videos, I will prefer the manual control because some cinema cameras doesn't have electronic contact, so this lens cannot be used, or maybe I got to buy another Irix cinema version. Another big plus with the electronic aperture, we can have super duper fine control aperture, like 0.1, 0.2, 0.3 controllable aperture. But with the Astrhori, this one is clickable aperture and every stop is one stop of light. This is just too big of a change. I want some finer control, but I can't. I found a very big problem while using this Astrhori lens. When you are changing the lens, there is no any lens mount indicator on this Astrhori lens. Most of the lens on the market, we have this like red or white lens mount indicator to change the lens in front or on the top of the lens. But on the Astrhori, we don't even have an indicator outside of the lens. The only indicator will be inside the lens mount. So every time you're going to change this lens, you gotta go behind the camera to change the lens. You cannot go in front of the camera and change the lens like this because there's no indicator on top. That's it. Which one will you pick? Leave a comment below if you have any question. I will reply to all of them. Thanks for watching.